Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into a deeply fascinating but honestly pretty concerning statistical paradox hidden right inside the health data of the Republic of Mauritius. We're zooming in on their infant mortality metrics from 2011 all the way through to the latest 2024 health statistics reports. And, by really unpacking this data, we're going to uncover a highly concentrated crisis that is literally hiding in plain sight. So let's just dive right into it.
Okay, to really get what's happening, we got to rewind a bit and start with some historical context, specifically a massive public health win. Back in 1990, the infant mortality rate in Mauritius was sitting at 20.4 deaths per 1,000 live births. But following that year, the health system saw this just beautiful, steep decline. Throughout the 90s, medical advancements, better infrastructure, and focused health initiatives drove that 20.4 number way down. It painted a picture of, frankly, overwhelming progress.
Section 1. The 20-year statistical plateau.
But here's where the story takes a turn. As we track the numbers into the modern era, our data shows that this incredible progress didn't just slow down, it basically hit a total brick wall. To truly grasp the scale of the stall, look at a direct 20-year comparison. In 2004, the rate had dropped to 14.4. Fast forward exactly 2 decades to the 2024 report, and the rate is 14.3. It barely budged. Now, to be fair, this rate is still way below the global average, which was hovering around 27 in 2023. But domestically, it creates this baffling statistical paradox. Why would a system that was improving so rapidly just suddenly stall out for 20 straight years? We need to figure that out.
Tracing the data from 2004 to 2023 on this chart, you can clearly see the rate kind of bouncing around, dipping down to 11.7 in 2017, spiking back up to 14.7 in 2020 and 2022, before settling right back in the 14s by 2024. It's a jagged line, but ultimately it just flatlines horizontally. This confirms that 20-year plateau we just talked about, and it brings up our core question for today. Why did progress stop, and what exactly is keeping this number propped up?
Section 2. The first culprit. A weighty issue.
To solve this mystery, we've got to peel back the layers of the government health statistics. We can't just stop at the final mortality number. We need to look at the conditions of the births themselves, and that starts with one crucial underlying metric. The government reports strictly define low birth weight, or LBW, as any infant born weighing under 2,500 grams. That is the absolute critical threshold. Infants falling below that line face much higher hurdles in their development, and they're far more vulnerable to complications.
And when we actually chart the timeline for this specific metric on the island of Mauritius, we uncover a really hard truth. Low birth weight cases haven't just gone up a bit, they have drastically more than doubled. Just look at this progression. Back in 1990, just 7.9% of live births were considered low birth weight. By 2010, that number surged to 17.4%, and instead of leveling off, it just kept climbing, hitting a staggering 20.7% in 2023, with similar highs holding steady into 2024. Guys, we are now in a situation where more than 1 in 5 infants born on the island falls into this high-risk category.
And the impact of this doubling? It's absolutely devastating. The official 2023 and 2024 reports don't mince words at all here. They explicitly single out low birth weight as the principal killer of these infants. Just to put that into perspective, in 2024 alone, out of 173 total infant deaths, 38 were directly attributed to low birth weight. That is a massive 22% of the total, making it the #1 leading cause, putting it ahead of even congenital anomalies and respiratory distress.
Section 3. A Tale of Two Islands. Now, what's genuinely fascinating is what happens when we zoom out a bit. Let's do a geographical comparison to see how this low birth weight crisis is playing out across the Republic, specifically comparing the island of Mauritius to the island of Rodrigues. Tracing the historical data side by side reveals starkly differing challenges. Back in 1990, Rodrigues actually started off lower, at 5.6% compared to Mauritius's 7.9%. Now, Rodrigues did experience its own alarming upward trend, eventually peaking around 2011 at 15.5%. But here's the crucial takeaway. When we look at the smooth 3-year centered moving average trends, Rodrigues has somehow managed to completely decouple from the island of Mauritius's alarming trajectory. By 2021, Rodrigues dropped back down to 10.6%, nearly halving its peak, while Mauritius just kept climbing, hitting 19.3% that exact same year. Visualizing this data between 2005 and 2021, the divergence is just undeniable. The dark blue line for the island of Mauritius pushes relentlessly upwards toward that 20% mark, while the red line for Rodrigues sharply descends. This visually proves without a doubt that this low birth weight crisis isn't just some uniform, inescapable issue across the whole republic. It is a problem with very distinct geographical nuances and potentially localized solutions.
So, we know these infants are highly vulnerable because of this rising tide of low birth weight cases. But figuring out why they are vulnerable leads us to the real climax of our data analysis. When, in their first year, is this tragedy actually striking the hardest? If we're ever going to fix this plateau, we have to know exactly where the breaking point is.
Section 4. The 6-day battle.
The answer lies in a tragic, highly concentrated window of time. The data tells us that the fight for these infants' lives is largely decided in just a matter of days. To understand this, we have to look at how the health reports categorize mortality by age. They define early neonatal deaths as those happening in just the very first week of a child's life, the first 6 days following birth.
When we slice up the 2024 island of Mauritius data based on that definition, the absolute core of the problem is laid bare. Out of 173 total infant deaths that year, a staggering 83 of them happened in those first 6 days, that early neonatal phase. The remaining 90 deaths, those are spread out over the rest of the entire first year. Think about that for a second. Nearly half of the entire infant mortality metric is decided before a baby is even a single week old.
And if we examine the historical data over a massive 30-year span, we see that the early neonatal phase consistently makes up the densest, most urgent portion of overall infant deaths. Year after year, decade after decade, that first week of life remains the ultimate critical danger zone. The numbers fluctuate a tiny bit, sure, but that heavy concentration right there in the initial window, it never wavers.
So the absolutely crucial point of this whole explainer is this. If we actually want to shatter this 20-year stagnation, if we want to force that needle from 14.3 down into the single digits, broad generalized infant care just isn't going to cut it anymore. We have to look earlier. For instance, we have to address the massive challenge of late attendance for antenatal care. The data shows currently only 29.2% of mothers attend in the all-important first trimester. Medical interventions must urgently target that earlier phase to better protect that immediate post-birth window. The primary battleground is exactly 144 hours long.
I want to leave you with this final thought. The data has spoken incredibly clearly to us today. We know the primary culprit is a massive doubling in low birth weight, and we know exactly where and when the danger is highest, with nearly half of all losses happening in week 1. So, armed with this highly concentrated data, how quickly can policy and medical infrastructure evolve to protect the most vulnerable in their first 144 hours? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Let's keep the conversation going.